There have been so many changes here at the Vatican recently. It's time for a new video to explain them all in one place. There is so much that's new with scheduling, tours, pricing, entrances, and much more. I've lived in Rome since 2001, and I've visited the Vatican more times than I can count. And I'm here to give you my top tips and tricks for getting the most out of your visit here. By the end of this video, you'll be perfectly equipped to plan your visit to Vatican City without stress, and hopefully get exactly the kind of experience you want. It's 2025, the year of the Catholic Jubilee, and the holy doors are open at the papal basilicas across Rome. But the Jubilee will be over at the end of this year and the holy doors will close. So the Jubilee is not part of the big changes I want to tell you about, although it's possible that planning for the Jubilee had an influence on some of these changes. I've got lots of news and updates to share about visiting the Vatican museums, St. Peter's Basilica, climbing St. Peter's Dome, and visiting St. Peter's Tomb. A few of the updates I'm going to share with you began before 2025, but there have also been a lot of changes already in 2025, so let's dive in. Let's start with the Vatican museums. In 2024, the Vatican museums extended their opening hours, so now they're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The museums are still closed on Sundays, except for the last Sunday of the month, when they're free and open for limited hours. But these longer hours the rest of the week were meant to help spread out the visitors and hopefully make visiting the museums more pleasant for everyone. I believe these longer hours did help ease the flow of the crowds just a little bit, but I still always recommend visiting the Vatican museums either first thing in the morning or close to closing time, since tourism crowds are a lot like a bell curve, smallest at both ends and fullest in the middle. When the Vatican museums implemented this new schedule, they got rid of their popular pre-opening tours that were pretty easy to book and accessible to most tour companies. And by the same token, they sadly removed one of my favorite tours, the Extra Time Tour, which is a tour that went at the end of the day and allowed you to be alone in the Sistine Chapel and have an aperitivo in the Pinecone Courtyard afterward, and it was pretty affordable. But with 2025, we've seen the return of these pre-opening tours and after-hour tours, but in a different way. I'll cut right to the chase. These tours are now much more exclusive and considerably more expensive. One of the most popular of these pre-opening tours, the Keymaster Tour, has stayed in place. But there's now a new pre-opening tour, which is a little bit later than the Keymaster, called Alone in the Vatican. Just a few tour companies are offering this tour. I did it with Live Tours and I made a video about it, which I'm linking to in the description below so you can see what it's like. This is a truly exclusive tour because you go into the Vatican museums at about 6:30 before they've opened to the general public. You wind up inside the Sistine Chapel with just your group before the Sistine Chapel opens to the general public, so it is a really special experience. And now there's a similar experience, although it's a little bit different, called Alone in the Sistine Chapel that goes at the end of the day after the doors have closed to the general public. This tour is a little bit different from the morning tour because you're not completely alone in the Vatican museums until about the last 45 minutes or so. You go into the museums at 6:30 p.m., which is after they've closed at 6 p.m. to the general public. So you're pretty alone because the crowds are pretty far ahead of you, although you're not entirely alone in the museums yet. And then by the time you are in the Raphael rooms, you are truly alone in the Vatican museums, and you'll be alone with just your tour group inside of the Sistine Chapel. What I like about this tour, even if you're not completely alone at the beginning, is that it's pretty relaxed because nobody has to rush to open the museums. Anyway, I've got videos about these 3 different tours and I'm linking in the description below so you can check those out if you want to see what they're like. And this brings me to the topic of the shortcut. This is a huge change here at the Vatican, and it's only just happened at the time I'm making this video, and there's a lot of confusion about it, so I'm going to break it down for you. The Vatican museums and St. Peter's Basilica are 2 totally different places to visit in Vatican City. The Sistine Chapel is part of the Vatican museums, and it's included in every visit of the Vatican museums. When you visit the Vatican museums, the Sistine Chapel is at the end of them, and it's physically right next door to St. Peter's Basilica. And although they're next to each other, there is not technically a quote-unquote shortcut between them. There is a set of stairs and passageways that does eventually connect the 2, but it's impossible for a tourist to take this route to go from the Basilica into the Sistine Chapel. It is, however, possible for a tourist to go from the Sistine Chapel into St. Peter's Basilica using this route, which has been nicknamed the shortcut. Over the years that I've been living in Rome and visiting the Vatican, the rules for using this shortcut have changed many times over. Suffice to say that there has been a pretty big change to those rules right now, and these are the rules that matter. News stories and blog posts and comments all over the internet are stating that the shortcut is now closed because of the Jubilee. This is untrue. The shortcut remains open. As has been the case up until recently, the only way to take this shortcut is if you are on a guided tour with a third-party tour company or private guide. It has never been possible to take this shortcut when you book tickets or tours through the Vatican Museum's website, because the Vatican Museums is not part of the Apostolic Palace where all of these stairs and corridors are. The museums simply have no access to them, so all of their tours and tickets are self-contained and pertain to what you can visit inside of the Vatican Museums. So only an outside tour company can take you on this shortcut because they're taking you to two unrelated sites, the Vatican Museums and St. Peter's Basilica, and they're getting permission to use these staircases and corridors between them. I know many of you are going to comment, well, why can't they just, come to an agreement or make it happen or whatever? But I believe this is deliberate, now more than ever. The new rules I'm about to tell you about that pertain to the use of this shortcut make it pretty clear to me that they are trying to limit access to the number of people who are using it every day. To be fair, I can understand this. One of the staircases that makes up this shortcut is a masterpiece by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. This staircase is known as the Scala Reggia, which means the royal staircase. This is because this staircase was used by royalty and other dignitaries to enter the Sala Reggia, or royal room, to visit with the Pope. This is an historic and delicate piece of architecture from the 17th century, and I'm guessing it's not a great idea to have thousands of people walking on it every day. Also, another part of this walk, as soon as you get to the bottom of the Bernini staircase, is to walk along the corridor that leads to the bronze door where the Swiss guards stand. These guards are not there for ceremony. Their job is literally to protect the Pope. The Swiss Guard is the world's smallest army, and I can assure you they are well armed and well trained. So I'm guessing it's not a great idea to have thousands of people walking along this corridor and past the Swiss Guard every day. The bottom line is they've made things more complicated, and this has changed everything. To use the shortcut, as I mentioned, you've got to go through an outside tour company or private guide, and that guide or tour company must be officially registered with St. Peter's Basilica. As of right now, however, to use the shortcut, they have to pay a hefty yearly fee. One guide told me that the fee was €1,000. It may be different depending on the size of the tour company, but suffice to say, it's a lot of money. Not only that, but every guide or tour company that wants to take their clients through the shortcut has to pay a fee for each person, and they have to register them in advance. Now, even if a private guide or tour company could defray these costs by increasing the prices of their tours, it's still pretty complicated, and a lot of guides and tour companies are simply opting out of using the shortcut. So this means that there are fewer guides and tour companies using the shortcut, which means that there is a scarcity of these tours, which means that they're going to be more exclusive and more expensive. So that's the takeaway for right now. The shortcut is not closed. It's still being used, but only by a very few tour companies and guides. So that's something you're going to have to decide if you want to invest in. My favorite tour that's still using this shortcut is the pristine Sistine with Walks of Italy. I did this tour with them recently. I made a video about it, and I'm linking to it in the description below so you can see what it's like. One small but very helpful change has been to the Vatican Museum's ticketing site. It used to be that you could only purchase Vatican Museum entry tickets up to 60 days in advance. And while that time frame is still valid for booking guided tours of the Vatican Museums through the Vatican Museum's website, you can now book your Vatican Museum entry tickets up to 6 months in advance. And I think this is a game changer. To wrap up with the Vatican Museum's booking site, I want to tell you about a few new tours that you can book, which I think are really exciting. Last year, to sort of quiet fanfare, they opened up a new site called the Via Triumphalis. This is a superb underground visit of a Roman necropolis discovered in 2003 during the construction of the new parking lot of Santa Rosa in Vatican City. I did a video for you, so you can check that out to see what it's like. A couple of things to note: it is not claustrophobic at all. Photos and video are allowed, and it has nothing to do with the Vatican Museums or St. Peter's Basilica. It's its own self-contained visit. This tour sort of came and went, and now it is back. You can book this tour on the Vatican Museum's website. It runs on Fridays and Saturdays. 2 new tours you can now book on the Vatican Museum's website are of the Papal Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major. One of these is a tour of the underground of the Basilica, which I think is amazing. It's a short tour, but it's pretty interesting. The other tour was introduced last year, and I absolutely love this tour. This is a visit to the roof of Santa Maria Maggiore, and it offers amazing views. I did a video about that, which is linked in the description below, so you can check that out if you want to see what it's like. Now let's move on to the big changes here at St. Peter's Basilica. After this, I'll tell you about changes to the procedure for climbing the dome and also changes to visiting St. Peter's tomb. St. Peter's Basilica is the world's largest church by many standards. The church remains free to visit for everyone, but everyone who wants to enter the church must go through security first, and this is what causes the huge lines that you see in front of the Basilica. Until recently, the security lines were wrapped around St. Peter's Square, but now they've moved the security lines outside of the square. The entrance is in the same place, but the security lines are now on Via di Porta Angelica, which is a street you'll see if you're coming from the Vatican Museums or the Ottaviano metro stop. In recent years, skipping these security lines has been vexing people, and it's been the subject of many messages I've received from a lot of you. Until recently, this was the advice that I used to give for either skipping the line or finding shorter lines. Come in low season, come first thing in the morning when the Basilica opens at 7 a.m., take a tour of the Vatican Museums that includes that shortcut that I told you about, or book a visit to St. Peter's tomb, because at the end of that visit, you wind up inside of St. Peter's Basilica. With a tour of the Vatican Museums and the tour of St. Peter's tomb, you go through security to visit those sites, so when you enter the Basilica from those sites, you have already gone through security, so you don't need to stand in the big lines in front of the Basilica. All of that advice is still valid. But in exciting news, you can now book your visit to St. Peter's Basilica. I did a dedicated video about this, which I'm linking in the description below. As you can see from the new official website of St. Peter's Basilica, you can now book in advance your visit to the Basilica alone, a visit to the Dome, which also includes a visit to the Basilica, or a visit to the Museum of the Treasury, which also includes a visit to the Basilica. You can also see that you can request a visit to St. Peter's tomb, but I'm going to go over that at the end of this video. The big deal about this booking system is that it gets you to a shorter security line. Many skip the line tickets are systems to allow you to skip the line to pay for tickets. It's never the case that you can just bypass security. Everybody has to go through security. And what you're booking when you use this site to visit the Basilica is an audio guide. So technically, the visit to the Basilica is still free. You are just paying €7 to get an audio guide, but having this booking does get you to a different security line, and usually that security line is considerably shorter than the big security line for those people who have not booked in advance. A couple of really important points about this booking system. We're going to be speaking specifically about the Basilica because I'm going to cover the Dome in just a minute. As I said, what you're booking is technically just an audio guide, but to use the audio guide, you need your own device, so a smartphone or tablet, and you need your own headphones. The next thing you need to know is that you have to be a little bit of a planner to use this system. I think you need to book at least 3 days in advance. You go into the booking system, you give it all the dates that you're going to be in Rome, and it'll show you all of the dates available for booking. From there, you can select the date and then the time. Another important thing to note, they do not have any bookings available for when the Basilica opens at 7 a.m. or even for 8 a.m. So presumably, if you want to visit the Basilica at those times, you just need to show up here and go through security normally. Once you've completed your booking, you're going to get 3 emails over 3 different days. The first email will be a confirmation of payment. The second email will be the confirmation of your booking. And the third email will arrive the day before your visit. It's going to be the QR code that you can use for downloading the audio guide. No matter which of these 3 tickets you book, you're going to be allowed to use what's called a reserved entrance for ticket holders. When you arrive outside of Bernini's Colonnade on the Via di Porta Angelica and you see these huge lines for going through security, you need to look for your line, which is going to be all the way to the right. If you can't find this line, make sure to ask only Vatican staff. Don't ask the police, don't ask people working in the souvenir stand. They don't know. You need to ask Vatican staff who are dressed with something that identifies them as working at the Vatican. Once you find your line, you're going to go through a little tent where another Vatican staff member will scan your booking. They will then send you to the security line, which, as I said, should be much shorter than the big security lines outside of the square. Remember, you do not need to book to visit St. Peter's Basilica. You can still visit the Basilica for free. You just show up and stand in the normal security lines, which can take anything from 20 minutes to 2 hours. As for the Dome and the Museum of the Treasury, both of these are paid visits, and if you don't book in advance, you can simply pay for them on site if you decide you want to visit them once you're inside the Basilica. Unlike the Vatican Museums, which charges a €5 booking fee to book entry tickets to the museums, St. Peter's Basilica does not charge a fee for booking in advance. So for example, what you'll pay to climb the Dome is the same whether you pay on site or in advance. And this leads me to the next topic, which is about climbing St. Peter's Dome. First of all, the Dome opens at about 7:30 or 8 o'clock, but with the booking system, they don't seem to be offering any bookings before 10:30 a.m. So if you want to book your visit to St. Peter's Dome, you're going to have to go at one of those times. But as I said, you could also just show up here and pay on site. Remember, booking in advance just allows you to skip the line to purchase tickets. With the Dome, there are two ways to get to the first level. The first is by stairs. The second is with an elevator. As you might imagine, it's a little bit cheaper to climb the Dome to the first level on foot than it is to take the elevator. Also, to climb the Dome on foot, there is almost never a line for that. But if you want to use the elevator to get to the first level of the Dome, there is almost always a line for that. And as I said, your booking this in advance allows you to skip the line to purchase tickets, but it does not allow you to skip ahead of people waiting for the elevator. I've tried this booking system a few times and I have never been exactly on time for any of the bookings. Each time I was outside of the booking time that I had booked, the Vatican staff told me that it didn't really matter that much. It was sort of indicative, like if I booked a morning time, I could go kind of any time in the morning. I don't know if this was just in that moment because this was February and Rome was pretty empty. They might be getting more strict with these times now. But also I think they do have to allow for people to get around, to get from point A to point B. Maybe you've visited the Vatican Museums and you thought you were going to visit the Basilica at a certain time, but you took a little bit longer, or maybe you needed to stop for lunch in between. So probably you can be a little bit late or a little bit early for these Basilica and Dome bookings. I just wouldn't be too far outside of that time. As for the Vatican Museums, you cannot be more than 15 minutes on either side of your booking time. They are much more strict about it over there. Still, speaking of the Dome, there is another change beside the fact that you can now purchase your entry tickets in advance. I'll just say that the entrance to the Dome has moved yet again. To climb St. Peter's Dome, you need to start with the entrance that has now been moved to the basement where the bathrooms are. From there, you go up a small staircase to the place where you either pay for your tickets if you're buying them on site, or to where the entrance is, and from there you'll climb the Dome on the right-hand side of the Basilica. When you're finished with St. Peter's Dome, you're going to come back down and you will wind up in St. Peter's Basilica on the left-hand side. One more small change at St. Peter's Dome is that the price has gone up slightly, but I still think it's worth it for the amazing experience and views. One small thing about visiting the Dome using this booking system, you're going to see instructions that say that you need to visit St. Peter's Basilica 90 minutes before your Dome climb. I think what they mean to say is that you need to be prompt for your Dome climb, but frankly, when you come down from the Dome, you wind up inside of St. Peter's Basilica and you can stay in there as long as you want. So you could certainly climb the Dome first and visit the Basilica after if you prefer. Speaking of the basement and the entrance to the Dome, they have moved the entrance to the grottos down here as well. The Vatican grottos are where many popes are buried, and it's free to visit this. It's part of St. Peter's Basilica, it's just underneath the main level. This is not a claustrophobic visit, you can easily access it, you just have to know where the entrance is. When you finish your visit to the grottos, you pop out into St. Peter's Basilica right near Bernini's Baldacchino. The Vatican grottos are not the same as St. Peter's tomb. The grottos are where many popes are buried because they want to be near the bones of the Apostle Peter. But visiting St. Peter's tomb is a completely different thing. And that brings me to the last subject that I want to tell you about that has undergone some changes recently. The best thing that's changed about visiting St. Peter's tomb is that you no longer need to send a fax to request a visit. Can you imagine? Until just a couple of years ago, to visit St. Peter's tomb, you had to send in a request via fax. Now, using the same site that I just showed you to book your visit to St. Peter's Basilica, the Dome, and the Museum of the Treasury, you can request a tour of St. Peter's tomb. Although you see the place to request a tour of St. Peter's tomb is on the same place as you can book a visit to the Basilica, the Dome, or the Museum of the Treasury, the part about visiting St. Peter's tomb is a little bit different. With the other three options, you are literally booking a visit, and it is confirmed once you pay. Unlike those visits which are confirmed as soon as you pay, with St. Peter's tomb, the most you can do is send in a request. St. Peter's tomb, also known as the Scavi, which means excavations, also known as the Vatican Necropolis, which is not the same as the Vatican Necropolis at the Via Triumphalis, is a very delicate site, and they only allow around 200 or so people in each day. But they have made it a lot easier to request a tour there. You just submit everything in the online form and wait to hear back. You guys, a lot of you write me asking when you can expect to hear back from the Scavi office. I really don't know. It doesn't seem to be consistent. You've just got to be patient, but they also have an email and phone number on the site, so in theory, you could get in touch with them and ask. Another thing that's changed about visiting St. Peter's tomb is the cost. It's gone up slightly. Tickets are now 20 euros for everyone. There are no discounts for any reason. But I think 20 euros is a really good deal to be able to see such an amazing historical site. One more positive change about visiting St. Peter's tomb, the minimum age has been dropped from 12 to 10 years of age. So this means that more families will be able to visit. Yes, they are very strict with the age, so be prepared to show ID. Whew, that is a lot of changes here at the Vatican. I think many of these changes are great, and they should offer a better booking experience and a better visiting experience for everyone. What do you guys think about all these changes? Drop me a line in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. After all these changes, if you want to know my 5 favorite tours of the Vatican, don't miss my video right here.